maybe we should start there, like just the types of efforts.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I think it's always good to define your terms as a coach. I
Yeah.
think a lot of coaches say similar words that may mean the same thing and may mean different things. And so, yeah, I think defining terms is probably a good place to start.
So like, I guess for me, and probably most people listening to this are more concerned about like half marathon, marathon.
Of course.
And then we can also chat about like 5K, 10K efforts. Cause I know there's a few more involved with that, but for like half marathon, marathon, what are the main efforts people should be training and focusing on for a prep? Okay. So let's start at easy effort.
Yeah. So first off, you have easy day, right? Easy effort. You're able to have a conversation and it is easy to have that conversation. So another cue I would use to define that is a dining hall conversation type pace. So yeah, the effort that you are running at should reflect you being able to have a conversation that you would with someone in the dining hall.
Basically how we are right now.
Right. Exactly. And so I think that's like the root, because that's a lot of like marathon training, especially early on. And this is what I was giving you as well. It's just really just building a foundation, and it's a lot of boring, repetitive work and just seeking aerobic adaptations and just building the engine out. And so you're just kind of doing things like strides twice a week. I like to call it like neuromuscular work. So it's like variations of hills or flat strides, 30-second strides, 20-second strides, maybe 6-second bursts, 6-second hill bursts, 20-second hills. All that's like post-run neuromuscular work. But early on, when we're doing foundational training, we're really only doing that stuff like twice a week after easy runs to just keep those fast twitch fibers stimulated.
Strides are such a small portion, but they do so much for you, I feel like.
Right. It's like very, very little effort that it takes for you to do like the 6 or 4 hill strides or the 6 to 8 flat ground strides. But just keeping that pop is like so important, and it helps you so much long term. And it's like with the brain and the fast fibers, it's like use it or lose it. So, just keep them stimulated twice a week, like do your homework on that, and you'll be good. But I think I saw something somewhere that's like there's a lot of people that once they get over the age of 25, they just like don't ever really like sprint anymore. But in the marathon, like your ability to have like that muscle tension and that pop, it can only help you.
Yeah, especially the last 10K.
Yeah, and people really learn through like real life examples. So I'll use like a post collegiate NCAA runner for example. A lot of guys, they finish like 4 to 6 years in the NCAA and they have all this track pop in their legs, and they've never run a marathon before. They'd never trained for a marathon, but these guys step into their first marathon, and because they all have all this like, just as I would call it, track pop, like they'll go out and run a 2:13 or a 2:14 for their first marathon. And these are just like collegiate athletes that were training for 5Ks and 10Ks, but they have the engine already because they've built it over the course of many years, but they have that muscular piece. And I just think a lot of people don't expect that. That's why I'm like kind of bringing it up. A lot of people don't expect like a guy fresh out of college in the NCAA to go run 2:13, 2:14.
Right.
That's well under OTQ.
I wonder if that's why, you see like people like Kelvin Kiptum, like he was 23 when he ran 2 hours, 35 seconds, like so young.
Right.
Like he could have had that extra, like, cause you're born with more fast twitch. Usually younger people have more of it. So like, he had the base built up already and then had that extra like neuromuscular aspect too. That's interesting.
Yeah, 100%. And so early on in the marathon block, it's a lot of easy running and then a lot of like neuromuscular work after those runs for just fiber maintenance.
How would you for if anybody that doesn't know what a stride is or never done a stride or like hill sprints like that, this neuromuscular work, how would you describe that? Like how would you go about it?
Sure. And so I describe this to my high school athletes and like marathoners that I work with as well. It's just post-run neuromuscular work is really just, you finish your easy run and then take a couple minutes, like get some water, you can go straight into it. It doesn't really matter in that sense. You just more so like all right, go do 6 to 8 by 15 seconds on grass, or as I call it, a cross-country surface. So that's grass, gravel, dirt, clay, just something that maybe isn't road or track, right? And I just always prefer like the softer surface stuff for that.
Yeah.
And I think it's good. There's not really any rationale behind
Right.
it, but
It definitely feels better.
yeah.
What should that effort look like? Like 100% sprint, 90%?
Yeah, and that brings up another important point. A lot of times when people do this stuff, they like look at it as like 100% all out sprint, but there's never really a point in a race where we are actually going 100% all out. And in fact, if you go and watch like an Olympic final, those that are running the 5K and the 10K, just go look at all those guys and girls on the track. They're all running extremely smooth, and they're running at like 94 or 95% of their effort, but mechanically they're just so smooth doing it. And so I like to say fast but relaxed, because you're just never going to go 100%. Like you're not, because if you're going 100%, then there's no aspect of control there. And I think that's the big piece. It's teaching the control. Run those strides, run your workout reps in a fashion that you would like to see in the race. You want your effort in practice to reflect that. If we're not running smooth in practice, then how are we going to do on a race day?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay, next effort up from easy running and strides.
Yeah. So for your build in particular, early on, we were doing a lot of like easy running, of course, but then there were 2 times a week, I believe. I want to say, was it Wednesday, Sunday that we were doing? Okay. Wednesday, Sunday, we'd give you a medium distance run. And so Sunday was a long run. Wednesday was the medium distance run.
Yep.
And that was what I define as aerobic effort. Now, when I say aerobic effort, I understand like there's a little bit of nuance there, because like pretty much all distance running is very much so primarily aerobic. I'm just using that term because as a coach, it's good to have these terms that kind of differentiate efforts, if you will. And so I've just kind of chosen as a coach to have like aerobic effort as like kind of the next tier up from easy effort, if you will. And so aerobic effort, I would describe that to give you guys a cue to be able to apply as conversational but labored. And so I heard this described by, so Inigo San Milan, he's one of the
He's a triathlete, right?
So he was the performance consultant for UAE, the cycling team. Then
okay.
They obviously had like Tadej Pogacar, top guy in the tour. Whenever they described like Z2 effort, and not to get into zones because I want to keep this into like talk zones, but they described that as conversational but labored. If someone was to talk to you on the phone while you're doing like this type of effort, then you shouldn't be able to hide from them the fact that you're exercising. And so there should be like these like intermittent breaths in between. And just to give an example, it's like, okay, like, yeah, that was a difficult test today. Like, I don't know if I passed it or not. Like, but like, there's those intermittent breaths. It's conversational, but there's a labored piece to it. And it's just like finding that pocket and just doing those twice a week for those medium distance runs and those long runs. I mean, I think that helped you significantly, especially because you didn't get greedy on it and you executed it in the way that I wanted you to and followed the definition pretty much.
Yeah, I think that effort specifically for me was a game changer because I'd never done that specific effort. Like previous builds I'd done, it was either like run super easy, like very, very conversational, or we're running like threshold or like high intensity intervals. So it was like, it's never hitting that, like, because really a lot of people call it like that gray zone, like zone 3 typically.
Right.
And it's like everybody says, don't go in there. It's just like you're not going to build any fitness there. But like that's so close to your effort on marathon day that you really get used to mentally and physically pushing at that like kind of uncomfortable effort.
Yeah.
But it's not so bad that you're going to be like super fatigued and delay your recovery at all.
Yeah. And I think the big key piece there also is that whenever you're prepping for the marathon. And just one little piece on zones. It's not like an on and off switch like people tend to think it is. Like, oh, once you cross over from 2 to 3, like, oh, it's like ruined or whatever. Like that's not the case. The body is like much more complex than that. But as I was saying, marathon specificity is really important. And so what we're doing with these long runs at aerobic effort that you were kind of just doing early in the block is we're introducing something that's very specific to what we're trying to do on race day early on in a way that's repeatable and manageable. And so let's just take like long run workouts as well for an example. I believe like probably was it 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, when we kind of did like the little like sim
Tokyo
roughly.
simulation.
Yeah. So, and this is where you can get creative with your workout design as well. The course at Tokyo, probably the first 4 or 5 miles, right?
Yep.
Is pretty significantly downhill. And so what did we do to create a workout that kind of mirrors that a little bit? We took a hilly like part of Austin, right?
Yep.
And the first 4 or 5 miles, we're just going to run it at like threshold effort, which is actually like faster than marathon pace. But mechanically, it's going to allow us to get used to running those downhills pretty quickly, because that's something that we need to be able to do on race day and manage it in order to be successful. And then after those first 4 or 5 miles, then just like the course at Tokyo, we ran flat. And just like kind of just went through our typical long run effort.
That was a brutal day. It was like 80 degrees and it's so humid.
Right. And so, but on race day, let's say that were the case, you've been there before.
Yeah.
You know, and so sometimes coaches will have like fueling tables for these pro athletes, and the pro athletes will be running up to it, getting ready to practice getting their bottle like they will on race day. Coach just goes and knocks the bottle over and just
now
like,
what do you do?
Sorry, you're not getting carbs for this rep, you know, because on race day, that's very much so a reality that the athlete may experience. So
practice
kind of
like you're going to play.
Yeah, kind of a long-winded piece on like aerobic effort, and it's different for everybody, but that conversational but labored piece is very specific to the demands of the marathon. And so let's just say, for example, okay, you're going for 6:04 pace, but a lot of these aerobic long runs that you've been doing have been roughly around
like 6:30 to 6:50.
Yeah, sure.
Per mile.
So exactly. But okay, we've been doing them every weekend for the past 12 weeks or so.
And they're getting faster too.
Yeah, and they're starting to feel better, and we're not getting greedy on any of them. Well, guess what? We get to race day, we're feeling fresh. We've got the adrenaline from the environment. We're well fueled. We're just ready to roll. All of a sudden, the race turns into just another Sunday.
Yeah,
and I think that's like so key, and it gives you a lot of confidence too.
Definitely.
On the track this morning, we ran the 1K rep at 6:04 pace, and I like you sounded great, you looked great, and I was like, yeah, this guy's ready.
Yeah, I felt like I was hitting the brakes the whole time. It was just
beautiful.
Like, slow down. Every time I looked down, we were like a little fast.
Yeah, and I mean that's just a very good sign that our preparation has been sound in that way.
Heck yeah, that's the confidence I need.
Yeah, man.
Dude, aerobic's been a game changer for me. And then from aerobic, next effort level up.
Yeah. So then this is where like, you know, things can kind of get a little bit like cross-defined, and like there's people that will like debate back and forth. Okay, like is this that, or is that this? But we'll just say threshold effort, right? Threshold effort can actually be like a pretty large range depending on like what volume you're trying to hit. So let's say I'm just going for like 4 miles worth of volume. Well, it's like, okay, like yeah, maybe that might be a little bit faster, or maybe we're doing 6 miles of volume, but it's in short intervals like 400s. Well, that still might be faster because the interval length isn't really that dense. You get what I'm saying? Saying there. But to give a cue to define threshold effort, because that's like kind of the general theme of what we're discussing, threshold effort is essentially if a coach were to speak to you during this, you should be able to get out a sentence or a phrase. So it's like now it's not really conversation filled with intermittent breath. It's more like breath filled in with intermittent like phrases and sentences. You know, like I think a good one to use is as a coach is like, what'd you have for lunch today? And it should be like chicken and rice and applesauce, you know, like that kind of. And if you're able to get that piece out, then it's like, all right, he's under control.
I started asking myself during the workouts, I would literally say out loud, can I still say a sentence?
Yeah.
And if I could, I was like, okay, still like controlled effort.
Yeah. And that's perfect. That's literally perfect. Steve Magnus had this one that was great. And obviously he's like a big inspiration of mine. I love to follow his stuff. It's like, I feel good. I feel great. I'm ready to communicate.
Ooh.
That one's kind of a mouthful.
That's longer.
But I mean, if you're able to get that out clearly, then, and you just have to be honest with yourself as well. Right. It's not like, I feel good. I feel good. So, you know, like, that kind of thing. Yeah. It's good because it can help people take like pride and ego out of it, because that's so important in training to be like an endurance athlete. So.
Yeah. So what's the purpose of threshold training? Like why focus on that effort? And maybe like what percentage of your weekly volume would you say you spend at threshold?
Mm-hmm. It depends on, well, and so this is an answer a lot of the time in coaching, and it sucks because people always want like a concrete answer, but this is the most famous answer in all of coaching. It depends. And so when it comes to how much threshold volume, like you can probably do in a week, I'll use myself for an example. So I usually have 2 big threshold days every week where I'm doing 10K of threshold work in the morning, and that's usually a little bit denser intervals, like 6 by mile or 5 by 2K. And then in the evening, I'll do 10K more of threshold work in shorter intervals. So an example of that would be 25 by 400 or 10 by
crazy
10 by K. Yeah, and it's like
25 400.
40-second standing recovery, like that kind of session. But it originally came from this guy named Marius Bakken, who we won't go into like the history of all that. But in that kind of like form of training where you're just doing like a lot of threshold volume, you kind of almost don't even really do a long run. Like you'll have like an 80-minute like run in the week that's like kind of easy, and that's all you'll do for that. But let's get back on track. The marathoner, it depends on like how much training volume you're doing in the week, and so we'll use you as an example. I felt like 15K worth of threshold volume was like somewhere good for you. Like, so like a 9 or 10 mile continuous session, or like a 15K like broken session. So that's like 9.3 miles of volume. And then when we were transitioning from foundational work to more specific work, we started you off with like 10K worth of threshold work. So that's like 6.2 miles. And so we use different variations too, right? We did 5 by 2K, we did 6 by mile, roughly the same. Like, did we do 2 by 3 mile? Maybe. Probably not. Actually, I don't think I remember assigning that.
I know we did. The most recent one was the 3 times 5K.
Yeah. So that's like a more race specific session.
Yeah. And
you can kind of mess around with it a little bit to where you kind of start off around marathon pace, but then you progress to more threshold effort as it goes on.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, like when you're doing like threshold work, at least this is how I view it, you're aiming for control of the breathing and control of the mechanics. And so it's so useful in the marathon. It's so useful because like if you can control that, then like you're getting really fit from it. And then you back off to the marathon pace stuff. And I know literally exactly what we did this morning, 3 by K at threshold, followed by 1 by K at marathon effort.
Yeah.
And it just felt like you were hitting the brakes and that it like everything was good. So perfect race week workout.
Yeah. I think it's really fascinating that I've done basically no set miles at marathon pace. Other than like today we did the 1K.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe one other workout, it was like do the first set at marathon pace and then get
And then
faster.
progress past it.
Yeah, but like every other marathon prep and like most plans online I see is like do this mile, do these workouts at marathon pace.
Yeah, and it makes sense.
Right.
It does make sense because it's like, it's specific, right? You think, oh, I'm going to run a marathon. I got to practice marathon pace. But I think a lot of coaches agree on this, that it's like, you're not getting that much like fitter from doing marathon pace. And I think like building the engine constantly from start to finish throughout the block is so important. You know, getting fitter through the weekly volume you're doing, getting fitter through the sessions you're doing. And I think when it comes to like those really hard intervals, like I guess what you would classify as VO2, even though like, you know, I wouldn't really want to get into all that for the marathon. It's just doing like that, like high end controlled work where like, you know, your breathing is labored, but it's manageable. You know, your legs are getting labored as it goes on, but it's manageable. That's very specific to like what the marathon offers in terms of challenges.
Yeah.
Because like if you're out of control in the marathon and you're doing like these VO2 type intervals that are just like, you know, you're hyperventilating and your muscles are just like going everywhere. It's just, it gets a little bit too far away from the purpose. The marathon's more of that like gradual challenge.
Yeah.
At least if you train the right way. Like if you just bonk, like you can probably perform the autopsy and look at your training and see where things kind of went wrong. But
yeah, I mean, the marathon, it doesn't really even get that difficult till like at least the half marathon point. It's like the first 13 miles are just a warm up basically.
If your preparation is right, then like the race doesn't start till 18, I like to say.
So that like effort, like you just have to do so much volume of it in training to really get anything out of it. It's like, or you can just bump the intensity up a little bit.
Right.
And you don't have to do 20 miles of volume or something to get some kind of stimulus out of it.
Right. And I would just say it's like, it's more valuable, honestly, you know? So.
Yeah. And the relativity of like doing all your like workouts faster than marathon pace, then you drop down. It's just like, oh, this is so easy because you get so used to that like faster than marathon threshold pace. So.
And it's like, I mean, it's just mechanically, right?
Yeah.
It just feels a lot better and a lot more manageable.